Affirmative consent enthusiastically. Yay!
Hello, Jodi.
Hello, Helen.
Oh, thank you so much for talking to us. So you have been a supporter of Counterweight from the start. We've tried, I hope as well, to give you a bit of support because you have been through absolute hell, like so many of our people have. And so we thought it'd be nice to talk to you about the need for this kind of grassroots movement, for community building, for practical problem solving, and for connecting people, and also explaining to them some of this stuff that just feels really weird and counterintuitive. How did it feel to you when it first hit you? Was it could you make sense of it? Was it what was it like?
No. Well, I mean, I moved here from a very diverse city, one in which everybody rides the subway. It's not a highly segregated city. I mean, people have a lot of contact with each other. And so it was kind of my first shock, was coming to a small town that is very homogenous in many ways, not just skin color, but very white, very politically homogenous. Most of the people here speak English, for example. And just hearing a lot of people talking about race. So that was a little I was like, why, like, that's weird. Like, I came from a place where there's no racial majority, very diverse. I didn't really hear a lot of people talking about race, at least not in my circles. And then I didn't hear anybody talking about it really. And then I moved here and it was like, wow, this is a big concern here. And so then when I started working at Smith and was hearing from the administration through various messaging, through various channels, I guess is the best word for it, that systemic racism is a big problem, and the only way to really combat, the only way a white person can help is if you admit your white privilege and you admit that racism is not something that somebody does, but is something that somebody is, or something is. I don't know. It was like kind of murky. And I just, I'm not an academic. So I was like, well, they must know what they're talking about. These are PhDs and people specializing in education. This is an elite liberal arts college. So I just, I went along with it. But right from the beginning, something it didn't ring true to me in some ways. Especially not on the campus of Smith College. It didn't vibe with I think for a long time, I was just trying to figure out, for a long time, I was still going by the definition of racism as an act that you commit, like the legal definition. And I was like really confused. It was confusing for a while until I finally figured out they were talking about as like a system of oppression that exists, and kind of like nobody's really responsible for it, but yet everybody is, or all white people are. So yeah, it didn't ring true to me. And these discussions that I was asked to participate in, invited to participate in, and then eventually one in which I was mandated, did not ring true to me. They felt very scripted. They were supposed to be authentic discussions about race, like getting to the hard questions. It didn't feel, the only thing that was hard about it was it felt like a bunch of BS. And I have a very hard time with that. It didn't feel authentic. It felt very scripted. It felt like the white people have one script and the people of any other skin color have a different script. And these are the scripts we're going to follow, race-based scripts, which is not good for anybody, I don't think. That's not authentic for anyone. So that felt really wrong to me. And yet I kept trying to push this voice down. This voice was saying, something's wrong, something's wrong. I kept trying to push it down because I was told, because in this world, this ideology, that voice is a voice of resistance, and that's the racism. That's the racism piping up. And I felt like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm racist. Like, there's a lot of like mind stuff going on when you're in an environment, a work environment in my case, in which all the people around you are participating and going along with this as if it's true, but yet you have this voice inside you that's telling you something doesn't feel right, but you can't check that out with anyone. You can't check that voice out. Like, you're not allowed to talk about it, because that's the bad voice, that's the racist voice. So eventually, this is why I think Counterweight is, I don't see any other organization, and maybe I'm just not aware, but I don't see any other organization doing what Counterweight does. To me, the number one thing is the community, because if you can't check out that voice with anyone, then it's like a recipe for insanity in as far as I'm concerned, and psychic damage. And so the only way I was able to climb out of this really was I had to seek out resources online that told me, validated that voice. And I sought out other coworkers behind closed doors and was able to, and they were like, yeah, something's not right. And then we were able to process it a little bit. And that process, it wasn't just like ding, 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 everything's fixed, but it got me on that journey to deprogramming myself, or it started me on the process. And I think it's a long process, and that's why we need community, and we need to be able to talk it out more than once. It takes several conversations.
Would you say, what we hear a lot is that precisely this, that people are intuitively liberal. Their feelings, their intuitions tell them that it is wrong to evaluate people by their race, that we need a kind of fairness, that we need reciprocity, that they have these liberal intuitions, and yet our generation and below haven't been taught to argue for these. They've just been the way it is. We just, if you judge people by their race, their gender, their sexuality, then you're really just not very bright, and you're unethical. So people trying to address this really strange and counterintuitive idea of racism as a system that we're all socialized into, and that if you are white, you have to testify to having these unconscious racist thoughts and trying to dig them out of yourself. And if you're not white, you have to testify to having these experiences of oppression, and confirm that you believe in one particular way to address race and racism. And people are largely, when they come to us, because 70% of the people who come to us are employees, probably a majority of those don't have a higher education. They don't have any background in this stuff at all. And some of them aren't from Western countries in which these ideas are common. They just find them frankly bewildering. And so I think that's one of the things that we're trying to do at Counterweight, is make the theories, the worldview, digestible on the meme level in which people are experiencing them, get them to understand how they actually work, so that they can argue with what they actually are, and also feel confident in their own ability to say, no, I am not going to pretend to be racist in order to try to fight racism. This is nonsense.
Yeah, it is nonsense. And the thing is, I found that when I started to push back a little bit, and my way of pushing back was asking them for definitions and outcomes, like, what are the outcomes here? I found that the people I was asking, I kept going higher and higher up. They didn't actually, either they didn't know, or they couldn't explain it. And so I started wondering, like, do they even know what this is? Like, it's so, yeah, I think I love that, like, standing up, and you might just find that these aren't authorities on the topic. They're just kind of, many of them I suspect are just going along with it, and they don't understand it either. They are also bewildered and afraid. There is fear too of keeping one's job, of course.
Yeah, this is what we find when people go into meetings and they're trying to ask, and we encourage people to ask specific questions. What exactly do these terms mean? Can you make me these assurances that I won't be forced to pretend to believe things I don't believe? How are you going to measure the racism that you say is prevalent here, and how are you going to measure the improvement
Yeah.
of it? People who have taken these ideas on and who are trying to sort of teach them to their staff, they don't have answers. There's vague waffle, there's buzzwords. It's often been compared to a religion, but religion often has a tighter structure. This is more like a kind of mysticism. You just have to believe in these invisible power systems, and you have to speak in the right terms, in the right language, and be aware of what is the wrong and problematic language. And then you will somehow magically make things better. And yet it doesn't seem to make things better, does it? Is there any sign, have you seen any sign that people are entering into these kind of programs, these meetings, these discussions, then come to a better understanding of racism and a sort of more unified approach to it? Does it bring people together, or does it just cause confusion and discord?
Well, I think that's the real question, right? I've actually decided that I don't really need to be able to explain CRT or this ideology, because I can see with my own eyes. I mean, I'm not measuring it like a social scientist would, but I can see with my own eyes that the student conflict is not, at Smith, was not decreasing. People were confused, just talking to other staff members like something doesn't feel right. I can see that the community at Smith College is not as cohesive and friendly and spontaneous and connected as it was when I was there as a student. And I attribute the destruction of the community directly, or in many ways. I mean, I'm sure there's other reasons, but in many ways, I think it has the exact opposite effect on a community. I think it's very divisive, and it's destructive, and it's disempowering to students. It encourages students to see, seeing everything through the lens of race. It encourages them to see themselves as victims and not take any responsibility for their own actions, and that, there's a decrease in empathy. It's kind of like a paramorality. You could see it like this ideology, like disabling your moral compass, that little voice. And then once you do that, it's very hard to connect with other people in an authentic manner. And when you can't connect with other people in an authentic manner, you can't have a healthy community. And so that's what I'm seeing. I don't see a healthy community at Smith. And I think this has a lot to do with it. And I think we need more data on this, studying, for me, that's the bottom line. What is the hoped for outcome? I don't know what that is either. And are we achieving it? And those are very simple questions that usually one would want to ask when embarking on a huge, expensive mission, such as a DEI initiative, such as Smith College, for example, and these other organizations are embarking upon.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I certainly, that's something we want to fund, empirical research, but I'm particularly interested in your approach, and you've got a much more sort of intuitive, community-based approach. What does this feel like? And I think for people who live on campuses and interact with communities, that's what we're hearing a lot from. It feels fraught, it feels tense, it feels awkward, it feels wrong, and there's a culture of fear and a feeling of needing to be quiet, or if you can't be sure, you're going to say the right things. So what would you say, what would you recommend to somebody who's feeling intimidated and silenced by this ideology?
Oh, well, I always tell people, you need to find, make it one other person, just one other person, preferably in the environment that you're in that's full of fear. Just one other person you can talk to. And sometimes that's hard. And it's very hard now because a lot of us are on Zoom. It's easier when you're in person. You can look at you can make eye contact, you can sense body language, you can tell if you're paying attention and you're sensitive. It looks like that person, that this isn't sitting well with that person either. I'm going to talk to them in the hallway afterwards and just kind of feel them out. I mean, it's kind of an art, right? Feeling somebody out, because you don't want to say too much. But if you make it your mission, I think you can usually find at least one other person who feels the same way you do. And then you can go out for coffee and have a real good, thorough talk about it. And I found, even just in the people I've talked to, that even just one other person can spur them to, like, I know this one person, she found one other person, and now they're leafleting the neighborhood together. I mean, she's a parent, and all it took was finding one other parent, and it made her feel stronger. Like, when you know you're not alone and you think you've been validated, like, yes, I knew it. There was something wrong. This isn't right. And once you really get that, you really get that you're right, that can just give you so much strength that I think you can't imagine before you have that you're on the side of right. Like, I hate saying that, but you know what I mean? I would never say the right side of history, because who knows, but that's complicated. But you know what I mean, Helen? Like, it gives you a lot of strength to know that your instinct is correct. And you need other people for that. Yep. And that's how community happens. If two individuals can connect authentically and honestly, then you find one other person. Then you find one other person, and then you build an infrastructure so that you can communicate, whether it's digital or a listserv or just in person, and then you find one other person. And this is the definition of a grassroots movement. And then this is not going to come from the top down. That's very clear to me.
Yeah, that's how we feel too. I mean, a lot of organizations are coming from the top down. They're trying to revolutionize institutions, structures, corporations and whole systems. And we need people doing that, I think. But I think what will work is, yes, one individual at a time, one organization at a time, connecting people, growing this groundswell, doing this kind of patchwork approach where people gain more confidence, more allies, that you can actually say, no, I don't think this is ethically right. I don't think this is the way to fight racism. I'm not going to pretend to be racist. I want to oppose racism. I want to oppose bigotry in all forms. This isn't the way to do it, and I don't want to pretend that it is. And I think once you've found other people you can do that with, as you say, we had one woman who thought she was alone. And then she started to sound out her colleagues, and she found there were a whole group of them who were having the same thoughts, and nobody knew that anybody else was having the same thoughts. And they came together, and they've now formed a collective of women, and they're all South Asian, and they're taking on post-colonial and decolonial theory. And I think they're going to just revolutionize. Wow. But I can't tell you which organization it is, but it's an influential one, and I think they're gonna kick it out, and I hope we can help that. And I think you have helped a lot of people to feel that this is possible as well. To, you don't have to be an academic and address this in these dense theoretical terms. You can just say, no, I am a person connecting with people. This feels wrong. We know what feels right, and we can say so.
Yes, I think there's a lot of power. We need the academics, but there's something very powerful about a non-academic standing up and saying this doesn't feel right. So I think people think they need academic language, or I don't understand it, so I'm not going to say anything. Like, I think people, like, trusting your gut is important. Can we talk about the art stuff?
Yes, let's talk about the art stuff. What's going on in the art world? How is this affecting?
So we have there's a lot of self-policing going on, obviously, right? Because remember I said the little voice, oh, that's bad. And really, it's a practical thing. I mean, especially established artists. Jerry Seinfeld stopped doing college campus tours. I think a lot of comedians did. He's just like, I'm done. Like, you can't say anything. And so a lot of artists, I think, have some of them really are into this ideology or feel like they have to infuse their art with this ideology in order to be accepted. And some of the artists I've spoken to, like white males, for example, they feel this pressure, like nobody cares about my art because I'm a white male, so I need to infuse some street cred here with the social justice stuff, or they kind of shrink back from it. And there's a big issue in this country right now where artists, a lot of artists and drama groups and other people working in projects rely on grants from nonprofit organizations. And every nonprofit organization I have looked at that gives grants requires some kind of statement of diversity statement and how you're going to incorporate that into your art. And they also want to know what color the artist is. They also want to know, like, they whether they say it or not, we know, and I think it's kind of a running joke that the skin color of the artist is important because they're trying to fulfill these diversity requirements or outcomes. And so that's very harmful because art, I believe Glenn Lowry just said this the other day. He was talking about the works like Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, and when he reads those works, he feels connected to something, the human condition. And he said, if people who, people of color read these books and they say, I don't see myself in that book, it's because you're not looking. That's a quote from Glenn Lowry. He said, because you're not looking. This is another way that the connection is breaking down, right? Like, if an artist is self-policing, then they're not able to do their job. And their job is to transgress boundaries and seek the truth. And so a truth that transcends politics and academics and all that. Art's not an academic exercise. And so on a broad level, culture, we have these cultural outlets, right? Art is one of them. Music is another one. Comedy is a big one. Sports is another one. These are all outlets. We have these like chimpanzee power drives, right? Like these kind of darker impulses because we're animals. And we have created these outlets to temper them or to sublimate them into individually and socially beneficial ways, right? And so once those start getting, and somebody described this on Twitter as they are load bearing for society. These are load bearing, these are beams. Once those beams start to crack and break down, those dark impulses don't just go away. Then they get dangerous. So these, and the in-group, out-group stuff, this is all primal stuff that we've managed to sublimate into sports and competitions. And, I'm on that's the other side. We're rooting against the other side. Like, that's all primal stuff. And now I see that now that the sports getting all infiltrated by political ideologies and, Black Lives Matter, that's divisive. Now you're bringing politics into something that's very primal that we need, that's deeper than politics. And when you remove that outlet, when people don't want to go to the ball game anymore because it's just political stuff, then where do those outlets go? Where does that in-group, out-group stuff go? And it just so happens that the ideology is very based on in-group, out-group stuff, right? It's really appealing. It's appealing to that primal instinct that we have, but in a negative way. It's encouraging animosity and aggression, and there's no outlet for it. It's not a healthy outlet for it. So to me, the arts and the sports and the comedy, these things are not frivolous. They're not extra. We need academics talking about this. We need Quillette essays, and we need podcasts. But I really want to encourage people to turn their gaze to these other things that are very, very important and arguably are the reason we have civilization or are able to maintain a civilization in a healthy way. and they are getting attacked through self-policing and, forcing politics into sports, forcing social justice ideology into the art world. So the way to do that is not just to complain about it. I mean, I guess, you could, I'm describing what I see going on. I think artists need to get to work, and anyone involved in any of these activities I've named need to process what they need to process, clean this stuff out, and do their job, because we need those things. They are load bearing. If we lose those things, I think we lose everything. Then we're just animals without those things. So I say to the artists, get to work. Start making stuff. And this is a gold mine, by the way. This is a gold mine. I mean, I made the wrap, right? Like, that was easy. Like, that was an easy, but I mean, there is a lot of raw material here, and people are so hungry for authentic connection. These other things are the glue. We connect with, you go to a ball game and you're cheering for your team, you don't know who the people next to you voted for, because it doesn't matter, because you're rooting for your team. Like, we need those connections. We need other ways of connecting besides just politics, just left, right, like just the tribe stuff. We need other ways to mix it up, we need a diverse array of opportunities to connect, because that's the glue. And those things fall apart. They just can't. They can't fall apart.
Let's make sure that doesn't happen.